Hello, my name is Andrea, and today I'm going to be doing a limited palette challenge. Originally, I was going to be using one of these limited palettes, but a viewer challenged me to do a palette. So you know what I say to that? Challenge accepted. Okie dokie. Today, the colors I will be using are Quinacridone Rose, Lemon Yellow, and Turquoise Blue. Let's see what these colors look like. Quinacridone Rose is this one over here. Let's see what that looks like. Very nice, very nice. Lemon Yellow is this one. Ooh, that's bright. Okay. And Turquoise Blue is this one here. Ooh, this one's not very pigmented. This is what I get for using student grade. Great. Oh well, let's see what we can make with this. First things first, I'm just going to cover up all the other colors so there's absolutely no chance of cheating. Get that on here all nice. That looks pretty good. Now, before I paint anything, I just want to see what I can mix with these colors. I'll put down the 3 colors, and then I'll start mixing between them. One thing I noticed about these colors right away is that they are awfully primary. That is, the subtractive primary colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow. Now, as I've said in my previous videos, what we call primary colors is based on the sensor cells in our eyes, cone cells, that us humans use to see color. There are 3 types of cone cells, and those 3 cone cells make 3 primary colors in 2 ways. The additive primary colors are red, green, and blue. And those are the 3 colors that if you mixed light together, so if you were like shining flashlights at a wall, you'd be able to use those 3 colors to mix all the colors. Now with paint, we use the subtractive primary colors. That is, each paint is absorbing some of the light. So if you absorb the light from one of each of the cone cells, you're left with cyan, magenta, and yellow. And with those 3 primary colors, we should be able to mix all of the colors. I'm not really sure if that's the case with these colors, but we'll see. My biggest concern is that this turquoise blue isn't that pigmented. Usually halfway between cyan and magenta is a solid blue, like you wish it was even slightly purple, but it's blue. Ours is definitely purple, which means this turquoise color is not that pigmented at all. This is definitely going to throw off my mixing neutrals game, but that's okay, I guess. This is a challenge after all. Okay, let's get drawing. Right off the bat, this super bright and colorful palette made me think tropical. So what I ended up deciding to draw is this bird. It's a colorful tropical bird called a turquoise-browed Motmot. And since turquoise was one of my 3 colors, I thought it was fitting. After sketching it in pencil, I then inked it. If you find you have trouble inking, it's probably because you haven't leveled up your inking skill. It's a tedious skill to level up, but you can do it. I believe in you. You just have to do your exercises. Try drawing a bunch of circles, or wavy lines. If you prefer hard mode, try stars, or how about hands? Oh, and do each one in one continuous line. Absolutely no line petting allowed. These exercises will be really hard at first, but as you level up, it gets easier. Unfortunately, there's no real-life user interface to tell you what level you are, but feel free to reward yourself with stickers if you want. Everyone likes stickers. On to painting. I start by mixing a brown for that branch the bird is sitting on. In order to get brown, I need to mix all three colors because it's a neutral color. I'd say that brown is kind of a neutral orange color. So I'll definitely need more Quinacridone Rose and Yellow than I'll need of the turquoise. The exact ratio is hard to say, but basically I just do it by eye. But once I have that brown on my palette, I can use that brown to neutralize any color that might be a bit too bright. With this limited palette, it's particularly easy to only mix oversaturated colors, since you need to mix all three colors to get a dull color. It's a lot easier to mix a dull color if you have a brown, a gray, or even a neutral yellow to tone stuff down. At this point, I was trying to get black. I think I did an okay job with what I was working with, but I couldn't really get it on dark. It always looked transparent and gray. If you ever wondered why printers have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black ink, this is why. In order to make just the primary colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, absorb all the light, you need a lot of all three colors. You need to fully absorb the red with the cyan, fully absorb the blue with the yellow, and fully absorb the green with the magenta. However, once you mix the colors, you're diluting the pigments with other pigments. It's harder to fully absorb any color when only 1/3 of the pigments are working in your favor. Since a black pigment absorbs all light on its own, you only need 1/3 of the pigments to make it black. Now, I gotta be honest with you, I wasn't really liking how this piece was shaping up. I think part of the problem was that I didn't really plan anything for the background, so it's just a blob of color. And it's not even a very even blob, it's just a blobby blob as blobs go. I also think I was trying to fight the palette too much. By that, I mean I wasn't straight up working with the bright colors that this palette wants to make naturally. I was constantly trying to subdue them, making much duller colors, and that made it so that all my colors were overcomplicated to mix, and therefore overly difficult to match if I wanted to touch something up. I also think the bird is too small, and it had way too many different colors in it. If I had drawn this bigger, it probably would have worked out better because I had more space to make all those color changes work. I thought about just trashing this footage and starting over, but then I decided to include it and make a second piece to redeem myself. Making art that you aren't proud of is an important part of learning to make art. By that I mean it's important to recognize when you don't like something, identify it, and improve upon it. Part of this is always going to be taste. People like different things, so you might look at this and say, this is amazing, I don't see anything wrong with it. But making some kind of judgment and choosing to improve on it will get you closer to making the art that you as an artist want to make. But anyway, instead of giving up completely, I do try and salvage this piece. I add things that I know generally make everything look better, like putting some shading, adjust certain colors so there's better contrast between different things. Really, anything I could think of. In the end, I thought it turned out okay, better than I thought it would, but I still really don't like it that much. Oh well. Let's move on to my redemption piece. Okay, back to square one. I still thought tropical would work with this palette, but this time I decided to draw a fish. My plan is to use bright colors so I don't have to fight the palette so much. I put coral in it because coral can be bright colors, the water can be bright blue, and the fish can also be bright. Once I've sketched and inked the drawing, I decided to try and use some masking fluid. I've never really used masking fluid before, I'm still kind of new to watercolor, so I'm not sure if this is normal, but the masking fluid was smudging the ink. I was definitely freaking out a bit, but I suspected that the smudged ink was suspended in the masking fluid, not on the paper, but I wasn't going to know for sure until I peeled the mask off. All I could do at this point was carry on and hope for the best. Now, to paint better than the last one. I made the background nice and blue, used that raw turquoise color at the top, and blended it down to a more purpley blue. After that dried, I added a second coat, leaving some water shines. I've done this water layered technique in other videos, and I really like doing it for some reason. I'm probably a little obsessed, but I think having an obsession is the healthiest way to develop a style. That way you're just doing it because you really like it. After I finished this second layer, I removed the mask. I had made sure to let everything dry before I removed the mask so I don't make a complete mess and ruin this piece. And now you can see how sloppy my masking job was. Ugh. At least the smudging was suspended in the masking fluid like I suspected. But I'm not exactly proud of this mess. I touched it up as best I could. At least these colors aren't difficult to match. This fish is a blue-cheeked butterfly fish, by the way. They are all yellow except for the blue-cheeked part. So I left that part white until the yellow dried so it doesn't bleed. Then I decided to make some lumps green, and after that I mixed up some red for this other coral. I wasn't making any perfectly accurate coral, rather I just looked at some coral for inspiration and then just did whatever. It's corally enough, right? I made these ones up here a pink color, sort of like cotton candy. My main concern was making it rainbowy enough since rainbowy colors are what's easiest to mix with this palette. I always thought that rainbowy color palettes look pretty amateurish. It's easier to make a palette look sophisticated when there's a lot of neutrals and you use specific colors to make a mood or make specific things stand out. When everything's so bright and rainbowy, it's hard to direct where the eye should look. So I was definitely spending more time making it so that the fish was more detailed, and it would draw your eye that way. Even though I wanted to use a rainbowy palette, I still made sure that some things were very neutral, like the rocks and the sand. For the rocks, I mixed up some gray using all three colors, making sure to balance them so that it read as gray. Let me know if you try this palette, and if you do, I challenge you to include some neutrals, because they are definitely the hardest to mix. Personally, I was surprised at how much trouble I had with this palette. Maybe it's because I really like using a limited palette to direct my color scheme, and because I could essentially mix any color, and I wanted to show that in this piece, it was much more difficult to create a cohesive color palette. Or on the other hand, maybe it was because all the colors were so far from neutral that it was much harder to control the mud. By that I mean mix the neutrals I wanted rather than the neutrals I didn't want. This got me thinking about schools and how there's often an assignment to paint using primary colors, and how a lot of starter art sets tend to be mostly primary colors as well. I always recommend beginners get a whole bunch of neutrals to start. A lot of different browns, a yellow ochre, a Payne's gray. I think you should learn to control the mud. Learn that you still get a lot of color with neutrals, and you learn to look more subtly at your neutrals and mix more precise neutrals. That way you have a good foundation to add brighter colors to. It's good to know how to mix bright colors, but I don't think it's that useful to have to mix neutrals out of bright colors. Especially since typically, bright colored pigments are far more expensive than those earth tones. Don't get me wrong, I do think it's important to learn how to mix color, and I understand that starting with primary colors has the highest yield of mixable colors than any other 3 starting colors. All I'm saying is that because of that, it's harder. And when things are harder for beginners, there is a higher chance they give up. And I've always thought that too many beginners give up too early because they unwittingly give themselves a challenge above their skill level. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments what colors you think a beginner should start with. Anyway, back to the piece. I'm just finishing it off, and I think I redeemed myself. I do like it better than my first piece at least. I'm just adding some final touches and eventually I stop. There we go, a signature. Let's take a look at the final pieces. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a comment, and if you liked it, hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos, make sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!